Dreyer, Babich, Buccola Wood, founded over 28 years ago, has established itself as Sacramento's most successful law firm for ordinary people. People like Dixie Smith and her daughters Charlene and Lyra, or Sue Islas, widow of Rick and their 3 children, Kayla, Reuben, and Roman. They've represented thousands of clients, from the very poor to the owner of the Oakland Raiders, Al Davis. Roger Dreyer has won more than $100 million for his clients, including 24 cases with at least $1 million in collections. A lot of lawyers profess success, but only Dreyer, Babich, Buccola Wood have established a distinguished and consistent track record of successful injury victim representation spanning over 20 years. One of the reasons for their success is persuading the jury to see the real truth in every case. And persuading the jury shows that our trial system isn't broken, it really works. And it's worked in all kinds of cases, like personal injury and wrongful death cases, vehicle accidents, dangerous products, job-related injuries, construction accidents, dangerous roadways, and trucking accidents. As advocates for the people, it's important to fight for a cause. They must fight for the rights of victims and champion the underdog against corporate power and greed. Dreyer, Babich, Buccola Wood has built an international reputation by securing more record-breaking verdicts and settlements than any firm in the country. Today, the Insider Exclusive takes an inside look at one of Sacramento's and California's most successful law firms, Dreyer, Babich, Buccola Wood, and their outstanding record for seeking justice for their clients, as we examine some of their multi-million-dollar record verdicts and settlements. Dreyer, Babich, Buccola Wood is proud of their legacy of excellence, representing ordinary people who may have limited or no financial means to devote to the cost of litigation. They fight for the underdog, they fight for you. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Sacramento, California, at the law firm of Dreyer, Babich, Buccola Wood. It's my great pleasure to introduce Chris Wood to the show. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you very much.
You know, whenever we talk about a case, I always ask each lawyer, why do you do what you do? Why are you a plaintiff's lawyer for the oppressed, the underprivileged, the people who don't have the money to hire folks like you?
When I first knew I wanted to become a lawyer, I thought I might want to go in as a criminal lawyer, as a district attorney. Mm-hmm. My mother was a juror on a case up in Shasta County, where I'm from. And I watched that trial for several weeks. And I thought that was my calling, because you could help people, help society through being a district attorney and convicting people of crimes.
Right.
However, once I started working here, clerking in law school for Roger, I got to see that you can make a real difference in people's lives in the civil justice system, because you can do more for them. You can help people, the victims.
Right.
That you can't do that in the criminal system.
Because the victims, they don't get any money when they have a problem, and a perpetrator commits a crime against them.
Well, it's not about the money.
Yeah.
It is, because that's how the civil justice system is set up.
Yeah.
But they get a lot more than that. The victims that we represent get a voice. In criminal cases, the district attorney, the police, they prosecute the crime, they put the person in jail. But this case is a perfect example. The defendant, Mr. Gardner, got 1 day in jail for what he did to his family.
We're going to talk about this case now. Smith versus Vista Verde Farms.
Yes.
Tell us what happened.
Okay. On November 19th, 2003, Mr. Gardner, the defendant, who was a part of this corporation, Vista Verde Farms, down in southern Fresno County, a very lucrative, large corporate farming community, started drinking about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And when he started drinking margaritas, then went on to beer, then made his way to another bar, and by 9 or 10 o'clock at night,
he was drinking and driving.
And he's about a 0.28 blood alcohol level. Okay, he's in and out of consciousness. Dixie Smith, Charlene Smith, and Lyra Smith are coming home from visiting their father, who had a medical emergency in the hospital, and they get hit head-on by Mr. Gardner. And the witnesses that saw it, that were following Mr. Gardner, were calling 911, trying to get someone out there to help because they could see him weaving in and out of traffic until it's too late, and he hits the Smiths head on at about 55 miles an hour.
And what happened to them?
Oh. Dixie Smith sustained a really bad fracture to her right lower leg, broken foot, ankle, a very bad laceration to her left leg that was infected.
And she was a dancer, wasn't she?
She was a professor at a community college in theater and dance, and that was her life.
And that kind of ended that, didn't it?
Well, for the most part. She could still teach, but she couldn't do the things she loved the most, which was get out with her students and show them how to do things, sing with them, and then also participate in the school plays.
What about her two daughters, Charlene and Lyra?
Charlene was the right front passenger, and she sustained significant head injury or brain injury, as well as a spinal cord injury and several internal injuries. And she's going to suffer with those for the rest of her life. And Lyra, who was in the back seat, sustained serious internal injuries.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you got this case, what were your legal strategies to win the case? What did you have to prove?
Well, you have to prove, number one, the most important thing for us was to hold the defendants accountable, which the criminal system did not in this case. As I said,
served 1 day in jail.
1 day in jail, and the corporation Vista Verde Farms was never even brought up.
Right.
So our strategy in this case was to find out how Vista Verde Farms was involved. There's 2 partners in addition to the defendant, Gardner, in the corporation. Through litigation, we found out that there was a 30-year pattern of drinking down in this farming community, driving while working, all sorts of things where the corporation really felt insulated.
Yeah, Mr. Gardner was one of the people that was...
Mr. Gardner was one of the...
Had he been arrested before for drunk driving?
He had not.
Okay.
But what we established through litigation, and that was going to come out at trial, is that there was a pattern of drinking during the day on the job. It was a definite old boys club down there in southern Fresno County, and the corporation felt insulated from it.
Right. In other words, law enforcement as well as corporations kind of had a cozy relationship.
Well, I don't know that they had a cozy relationship with the law enforcement, but they just had avoided any responsibility or accountability.
Now, you got a $7.75 million verdict, and kind of unusual, you got it the day after the trial started, correct?
Well, yes, and it wasn't a verdict, but it was a settlement right after the first day of trial.
Why did it happen so fast?
Well, it didn't happen fast. The build-up to that was over a year of litigation, depositions, discovery, finding out the history on this gentleman and his drinking habits, and as well as the corporate partners he had in the corporation and what they knew and what they allowed him to do over time. And what they allowed him to do over time, we found, was drink and drive and not really take any responsibility for it. And it was not until trial. It wasn't until that first day when we showed up for court, heard our motions, pretrial motions, started picking a jury, that the corporate officers, the 2 other officers in the corporation, realized that they were going to be held accountable. And you could visibly see their physical demeanor change from that of self-righteous, I have no responsibility, to, wow, these guys are for real. This case is going to go to trial, and we have changed these people's lives. And they realized it, and they made the corporation a significant contribution to the settlement to make it happen. So they finally, after years of litigation and getting ready to pick a jury, finally were held accountable for what they did.
Now, I understand that you were able to collect damages not only from the driver, but also Vista Verde Farms.
Yeah, Vista Verde Farms, they added or contributed over $100,000 out of their own money to make the case go away or make it resolve.
What are the lessons to be learned from this particular case?
The lessons to be learned are that the civil justice system can do things for people that the criminal system cannot.
Right.
The civil justice system in this case gave Dixie Smith, Charlene Smith, and Lyra Smith a voice.
Right.
It gave them an opportunity to confront the people that changed their lives forever. And while the case resolved for a significant amount, you have to look at the circumstances that led to that, and that is the fact that they are badly injured, and they're going to live with that for the rest of their lives. So it sounds like a big number. It is a big number, but when you put it in context, you understand why why we got there.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you very much for being on the program, and I want to thank you on behalf of the Smith family and every family out there who needs lawyers like yourself, who are willing to take up the cause and bring justice.
Well, by holding this corporation accountable, what that will do is hopefully reduce the amount of other folks in the Smiths situation, which is, when you ask about a legal strategy, that's the purpose.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Helping the public and helping people, and sometimes it's by making sure conduct is not repeated. And I can tell you, Vista Verde Farms and Mr. Gardner are going to make sure that conduct is never repeated.
Well, you did a great job, and thanks for being on the program.
No, thank you very much.
I'm very pleased to have with us the lawyers that represented the Islas family. Roger Dreyer, Stacy Roberts, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Talk to us a little bit about this particular case. What happened?
In this case, Mr. Islas was driving a motorcycle. The incident actually took place in 2001 on December 4th, and he was driving southbound on Sunrise Boulevard. The responsible party was stopped at a stop sign at Sunrise and Kiefer and was waiting there, attempting to make a left-hand turn onto Kiefer northbound. And in this case, there was evidence that Mr. Islas made several attempts to pass vehicles. There was some conflicting evidence on whether Mr. Islas attempted to make a pass in a no-pass zone just prior to impact. Mr. Islas, we contended Mr. Islas was operating his vehicle in the southbound lane and eventually was struck when the defendant pulled out from Kiefer Boulevard directly into his lane of travel.
Mm-hmm. Steve, the challenge of our case was, because there's such a bias against motorcyclists, that we had to get a jury that would listen to the facts of this case and not prejudge Mr. Islas because he was just on a motorcycle, because this fit with what they thought.
So well, not only that, but I heard when you talk about conflicting evidence, there were some people that said that he was speeding.
True.
That he was crossing the line where he shouldn't have been crossing and that sort of thing. So here's a question. How do you pick that kind of jury? Because a lot of people don't like motorcycle drivers.
Well, it's something that we deal with very upfront. When Stacy and I tried this case, we don't hide it. We put it right out there and ask people about their feelings about motorcyclists, because if you don't drive a motorcycle, inevitably you've had a bad experience with them.
Right.
And you don't like them because they're scary. And so in this case, we felt like we really needed to create a mental image in the mind of the jury that they would galvanize them in terms of what Mr. Walsh's image was at the time of this incident. Because we had a very good witness that said, I could see the motorcyclist going, why is this guy moving forward? He was the driver right behind him. So we hired a very talented visibility expert who developed a visibility study which showed the view that Mr. Walsh would have from the cab of his vehicle of Mr. Islas on his approach. And then it became very clear that whatever these other witnesses saw earlier on was really irrelevant. It's what Mr. Walsh had to see and the opportunity to see before he made the decision to pull out.
And that is irrespective almost of the speed of Mr. Islas. It's just irrelevant, isn't it?
And
in other words, he should have seen it regardless. Correct?
Regardless of the speed, regardless of whether Mr. Islas made a pass or didn't make a pass in the no-pass zone, he was there to be seen. He was visible before impact.
I understand that this was the largest wrongful death verdict in Sacramento County at the time, wasn't it?
Back in, I guess we tried this case in 04. It was the largest general damage verdict back then. But it was a very compelling case because Sue Islas was a wonderful mother. There was 3 little children, and by all accounts, Mr. Islas was just a regular guy. And that's really where we wanted, when you ask, how do we pick a jury, we want a jury that was going to relate to Mr. Islas and relate to the family and connect with him and, most importantly, care about him. No one really appreciates how devastating these kind of losses are until they're victims of it. This is a family, while it's been some years since we represented them, we stay in touch and had a real connection with the family because it was a very sad story. And every one of these kind of catastrophic losses, wrongful death cases, people read about them, but no amount of money really adequately compensates him for the
There's
loss.
issues that are important in a case like this, like liability and negligence issues. Do you care to talk a little bit about how you go about showing who's negligent? And because the jury came back with a finding that the defendant, the driver, was 100% negligent, didn't they? How did you show that?
Well, in this case, what we did, it was a combination of, we had various witnesses, eyewitnesses to the incident that we brought in to testify about their observations. In addition, Mr. Dreyer mentioned that we also had a visibility study performed, and we had an accident reconstruction expert who had been on the California Highway Patrol MATE team for, over 25 years plus in his career in the past, as well as one of the current MATE officers, California Highway Patrol specialized MATE officers that testified on the case. And, the physical evidence showed, even the conclusion of the MATE officers, that the defendant was responsible in this case.
When you polled the jury afterwards, that must have been awfully convincing, that visibility study, wasn't it?
The visibility study was very powerful because it did create that image in people's eyes. Instead of thinking about it, we were able to give them a visual of it, and that's why the visibility study done by Mr. Kafitz was so powerful. But we also had another very important piece of evidence, and that's the evidence of Mr. Islas that he left us. We had a coroner testify about the injuries that Mr. Islas died from, the nature of the blunt trauma, and he was able to determine speed that Mr. Islas would have been traveling at the time of impact, and that because of the nature of the organs and what bones, what kind of forces are necessary to break certain bones or suffer certain types of injuries. It's grisly testimony, and having a coroner talk about it was very powerful. But what it did was it really undercut the defense experts' reconstruction because they wanted him to be going faster at the time of impact.
Right.
But the best testimony we were able to provide at time of trial was the testimony by Mr. Islas himself in terms of the injuries.
His autopsy. That is amazing.
So it was very, the nature of what we do is scientific. You're never going to fool a jury. People think that that's what's going to happen, but especially from our perspective where we represent the victims, we're held to a higher standard, we're held to a higher burden of proof. We have to really prove things to such a convincing level, even though the burden doesn't say that. Before people are going to compensate financially, they want to be convinced that the correct party has been held accountable.
Yeah. What was the verdict in this?
We got a verdict, I think, about 6.7, but we had made a demand on the defense long before for, I think, $4 million, and because they didn't pay it, we not only were able to get the judgment paid, but we also were able to get interest on the judgment and all of our expert costs.
How does a jury pick, arrive at a number? That's what baffles me and probably everybody who ever sees these verdicts. How do they come up with that number?
Well, I think that jurors reflect on their own common sense and they reflect on their own life experience. But wrongful death cases are the most difficult cases for jurors to assess in terms of value of this non-economic loss, the quality of life loss. They can look at the empirical evidence, the loss of income, medical bills, things like that, but they cannot focus in on value of life.
Right.
And in every one of these cases, we're challenged by that, and it's the lawyer's job to communicate who the person was to the jury so they get an ability to assess. It's not just Joe Blow.
Yeah.
It's this particular human being. And the value of loss of life, we deal with it every day. That's also a complex reason why people have a tough time doing it, because we've all lost parents, we've lost friends. So it's not an unusual experience.
Right.
But it comes down, I think, to from the very beginning of getting the jury sensitized in jury selection to the task at hand, not being afraid of the task, and then getting them engaged with the family and understanding the loss.
You have a lot of cases that come your way. How do you pick cases? How did you get this case, and why did you decide to represent the family?
Cases that come to Stacy, myself, the firm, are a result of what people know about us and hear about us.
But there's some cases you don't take.
Well, we want to take cases where we feel like we can make a difference for the family, and we believe that we have someone on the other side that we can find accountable. Stacy, from your perspective, what's your view?
Well, we want to absolutely, if there's a party that needs to be held accountable, that's our focus. And you know, as Mr. Dreyer said, the main focus is taking care of the family. And in this case, in particular, we had Mr. Islas died. He was only 30.
Right.
He had 3 children. He had a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and a wife. So our whole focus from day one, we had this case for almost 3 years before we went to trial. Our focus was to do whatever we could in this case to make sure that family was taken care of in the way that we can make a difference.
And that's important to bring up when you take a case to trial. You're willing to do that, no matter what happens, correct? To get justice for your clients. And a lot of it is a lot of preparation, isn't it?
Well, trial work is total blue-collar hard work. And the best lawyers want to go to trial. And that's where you can affect change. And it is hard work, but it's very rewarding work in terms of when you have a family like this, you make a difference in someone's life.
Yeah.
And it's the one opportunity for the person who's passed to have a legacy. The best legacy is to live your life and be there and be a father and mentor your children. But when that is lost, these children all now are going to have an education. They're going to have things provided to them that are going to make a difference in their life and give them opportunities. And we always counsel our clients that it's important that the children know that this is a terrible loss, and they need to respect their father or their mother and do good work with what they get.
A lot of personal work there, isn't it?
Yes, but this family made the hard work really easy.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad you could share this case. It's wonderful having you on the show. And most importantly, congratulations on a great verdict. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.